Since launching a major offensive on Avdiivka on October 10, Russian forces gained 11 square kilometers, advanced 1.5 to 2 kilometers on the northern flank, advanced 1.5 kilometers on the southern flank. They lost at least 10,000 men and 221 vehicles as of November 10. As Russia's wider war on Ukraine grinds toward its third year, both countries' tanks mostly aren't fighting as tanks. Hounded by drones and artillery, hemmed in by mines, Ukrainian and Russian tanks tend to hang back a mile or two behind the front line, angle their main guns high, and fire at targets their crews can't see, like tough little howitzers. That's not what's happening in one key sector. For 2 months now, the Kremlin has been hurling every available regiment and brigade at Avdiivka, a key Ukrainian strongpoint just northwest of Donetsk City in eastern Ukraine's Donbas region. To make the Russians pay for every yard they advance, the Ukrainians have deployed tanks, and they're fighting as tanks, rolling close to Russian assault groups to fire their cannons while Russian missiles explode around them. "We hold the defense line thanks to the tanks," one Ukrainian soldier told Adobe. A drone video that circulated online this week depicts one of these armored counterattacks. A Ukrainian tank belonging to the 116th Mechanized Brigade, a T-64 apparently, rolls up on a Russian infantry team sheltering in a house just east of the sprawling coke plant that anchors Avdiivka's northern flank. Rapidly advancing, then retreating, then advancing again in order to complicate the Russians' aim, the T-64's three-person crew fires several rounds from its 125mm main gun and demolishes some structures. What appears to be a Russian anti-tank missile narrowly misses the tank. Finally realizing they've lost, the Russian infantry flee on foot. The skirmish highlights the tank's strengths, its mobility, firepower, and protection. It also highlights how vulnerable infantry are to tank attacks when the infantry haven't had a chance to dig in and aren't supported by tanks of their own. It's not that the Russian regiments and brigades around Avdiivka, altogether overseeing an estimated 40,000 personnel, don't have tanks and other armored vehicles. They do. We recently observed, north of Avdiivka, a rare tank-on-tank fight. But the Russians learned the hard way that long columns of vehicles are extremely vulnerable while staging for an attack. For the first month of their Avdiivka campaign, the Russians sent column after column toward Avdiivka, only to run into pre-sighted Ukrainian kill zones south, east, and north of the city. Blasted by mines, artillery, and drones, these columns lost hundreds of tanks, fighting vehicles, and other vehicles. In mid-November, Russian commanders switched up their methods. Perhaps noting the successes the Ukrainians enjoyed this summer while deploying small dismounted infantry teams, the Russians began leaving their vehicles behind. Russian forces are employing fewer vehicles in smaller numbers. Ukrainian analysis group Frontelligence Insight reported on November 24th. There's a notable increase in the use of small tactical groups. When unsupported, these infantry are fodder for experienced tank crews, and Ukrainian commanders seem to appreciate that. They've deployed to Avdiivka's flank some or all of no fewer than 5 brigades. 4 are mechanized brigades, each with a single company or battalion of respectively a dozen or 30 tanks. 1 is an actual tank brigade with several tank battalions. It's unclear exactly how many tanks the Ukrainians have deployed for the defense of Avdiivka. Scores? 100? Regardless, it's a messy mix of types. Older and newer T-64S, T-72S, some Leopard 2S, and possibly even a few ex-Russian T-90S. But any one of these tanks is more than a match for an unsupported infantry squad. Note, the Ukrainians' tank tactics around Avdiivka don't guarantee the city's survival. The Russians have thousands more troops in the Avdiivka sector than the Ukrainians do. And despite purportedly losing hundreds of people a day, the Russians show no sign of relenting. According to the UK Defense Ministry, the Kremlin's decision to make a go at Avdiivka resulted in a 90% increase in Russian losses across the 600-mile front line. But Russian forces may be suffering losses along the entire front in Ukraine at a rate close to the rate at which Russia is currently generating new forces, the Institute for the Study of War in Washington, D.C. concluded. As many new troops arrive every day as experienced troops are killed or wounded. The Kremlin can sustain its Avdiivka campaign as long as President Vladimir Putin is willing and able to absorb the domestic consequences, ISW warned. but in expending all of its newly mobilized manpower for what so far amounts to marginal gains around Avdiivka, the Kremlin might be giving up opportunities to attack elsewhere, now or in the near future. According to ISAW, high Russian casualties will likely prevent Russia from fully replenishing and reconstituting existing units in Ukraine and forming new operational strategic reserves if Russian force generation efforts continue at current rates, while the Russian military continues operations. To build up forces for other efforts, the Russians will have to succeed in capturing Avdiivka, or stop trying. The former is easier said than done as long as the Ukrainian army's tanks stand in the way.
Thanks for watching, and don't forget to subscribe. Also, if you want to support Warthog Defense, please become our member and get early access to new videos, exclusive members-only videos, and become administrator in comment section. The membership link is in the description.
Rescues every day. We had a guy last week, it's 6 rescues in 6 days. He's doing the job every day.